Hi, welcome to this video on stamp duty for the SQE. Stamp duty is relevant to business law and it should be distinguished from stamp duty land tax. Stamp duty applies to the purchase of shares, whereas stamp duty land tax applies to the purchase of land and property. In this video, we'll be focusing on stamp duty. You might see a question on stamp duty come up in relation to purchase of shares. It isn't listed as a standalone tax in the SRA's SQE syllabus, but there is still the potential that you might have a question on this. Let's take a look at stamp duty in more detail. Stamp duty will apply where shares are being purchased, so potentially for monetary consideration, like for money, and they are being transferred to the purchaser using a stock transfer form. Stamp duty is not going to apply where the consideration that's being provided for the shares is £1,000 or less. So let's imagine Simon is purchasing £500 worth of shares in a large company, and those shares are going to be transferred to him using a stock transfer form. Simon won't need to pay any stamp duty in this situation because the transfer is for less than £1,000. If the transfer was for over £1,000, then you will have stamp duty apply, and stamp duty applies at a rate of 0.5%, then rounded up to the nearest £5. Let's take a look at an example calculation. Imagine that Simon is purchasing the same shares, but he's purchasing £2,300 worth of those shares. That's the consideration he's providing for the purchase. It's above £1,000, so stamp duty is going to apply. So the first step will be working out 0.5% of the purchase value. 0.5% of £2,300 is £11.50. We then need to round that up to the nearest £5. And I stress that it is rounding up. £10 is the nearest £5, but we need to round up. So that makes £11.50 rounded up to £15. £15 is a stamp duty that Simon would pay on this transaction. It's important to note as well that stamp duty is generally not payable on gifts. That's different to other taxes. So capital gains tax, for example, can be payable where a disposal is taking place of a gift. But stamp duty generally doesn't apply where the transfer is as a gift, so not for any consideration. I mentioned that for stamp duty to apply, the transfer needs to have taken place using a stock transfer form. Now, many transactions now take place electronically, such as using a system called the CREST system. This is less relevant for the SQE, but where a transfer is taking place using the CREST system, for example, electronically, then you have some other tax apply called stamp duty reserve tax. It is similar in some ways to stamp duty, but it is its own tax. It also applies at a rate of 0.5%, but key differences are that there isn't the £1,000 or less exception where stamp duty reserve tax won't apply. That doesn't exist, unlike for stamp duty. So regardless of the value of the shares being transferred, purchase price being paid for them, stamp duty reserve tax will apply at a rate of 0.5%. Another important difference is that you don't have any rounding up to the nearest £5. So you'd only work out the 0.5% figure, and that would be your stamp duty reserve tax payable. That's a quick overview really to stamp duty and stamp duty reserve tax I've added in there too. It's important to note, and I guess this is good for your commercial awareness as well, that stamp duty and stamp duty reserve tax are expected to be reformed in 2027. So what you've learned in this video, from 2027, whenever the government implements the changes it's proposed, the rules might be quite different from that point. And so the information here may no longer be relevant. So just something to bear in mind. I hope you found this video useful. If you're interested in seeing a video on a particular topic, then consider leaving a comment. If I see there's quite a few comments on a certain topic, then I might make a video on that. Please also consider liking and subscribing to this video to support the channel. Until the next video, best of luck with your SQE prep.